Well, good morning. My name is John Hughes. I'm the president of the National Press Club. I'm also an editor at Bloomberg First Word, and that's Bloomberg News' breaking news desk here in Washington. Our guest today is former Senator Rick Santorum, and of course, he's a Republican presidential candidate, and he's going to discuss immigration this morning. First, I want to introduce a couple colleagues who are up here with me. Jerry Zrimsky, to my right, is the Washington bureau chief for the Buffalo News. He's a former National Press Club president, and he is the current chairman of the club's Speakers Committee. To my left, Jonathan Salant is the Washington correspondent for NJ Advance Media, and that serves NJ.com and the Star Ledger. And he's the Speakers Committee member who organized today's event, and he's also a former National Press Club president. I want to welcome our C-SPAN and public radio audiences, and I want to welcome those of you in the room today. You can follow the action on Twitter. Use the hashtag NPCLive. That's NPC Live. So our speaker today was the runner-up to Mitt Romney for the 2012 Republican presidential nomination. He won the Iowa caucuses and several other states. Now in his second try for the presidency, Senator Santorum, at least so far, is lagging in the opinion polls. He was relegated to the happy hour or so-called kids' table debate on Fox News earlier this month. He wasn't happy about it. He said, quote, "The idea that a national poll has any relationship to the viability of a candidate, ask Rudy Giuliani that. Ask Phil Gramm that," end quote. He was asked during that debate, "Has your moment passed, Senator?" He said the message that worked 4 years ago will propel him again. He also pointed to his track record. That track record shows he was elected to the U.S. House twice from a Democratic-leaning district. He won 2 terms in the Senate representing Pennsylvania, which leans Democratic in presidential years. In Congress, he wrote the law outlawing the procedure that some call partial birth abortion. He authored bills on sanctioning Iran. He was a member of the House Republican Gang of 7 that exposed the House banking scandal. He became the Senate's third-ranking Republican, and he was a vocal opponent, still is a vocal opponent, of same-sex marriage. But today, Senator Santorum is here to talk about immigration. This has emerged as a major issue in the 2016 campaign. Donald Trump, the current frontrunner for the Republican nomination, has called for deporting all 11 million unauthorized immigrants. Trump also says he wants to revoke the 14th Amendment's guarantee of citizenship for anyone born in the United States. The Washington Post said that immigration proposals that, quote, languished at the edge of Republican politics, end quote, now are in the party's mainstream thanks to Trump. Senator Santorum says his immigration proposal will take into account the millions of Americans who can't find jobs. He's here now to tell us more. Please join me in giving a welcome to the National Press Club to Senator Rick Santorum.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you for being here. I am, as many of you know, the son of an Italian immigrant. My father's journey to America rescued him from a childhood as a brown shirt in Mussolini's corps, and probably likely from being some cog in Mussolini's war machine. But it wasn't as easy as simply boarding a ship and coming to America for my father. My Italian-speaking grandfather was able to come to America in order to flee this new fascist regime in 1923, in spite of the Emergency Quota Act of 1921 that limited Italian immigrants to just a few thousand Italians a year. It turns out that my grandfather's hometown in Italy was part of Austria before the First World War. And so my grandfather was considered an Austrian by the American government. He was able to come, but he wasn't able to bring his Italian children with him. In 1930, he became a citizen after working most of that time in the coal mines of southwestern Pennsylvania. He was then able to unite his family in America. When my father told me about his family story and journey to America, I asked him the natural question: did you resent America from keeping you away from your father and leaving you in a fascist country for the first 7 years of your life? He said, no, America was worth the wait. He was right. America was worth the wait because we have been a country that puts the law above the people making and executing the laws. The greatest protection each of us has is that no one is above the law in America. That includes presidents, justices, and yes, immigrants. The law that kept my father and grandfather apart was passed because our nation needed to balance labor markets, national security interests, and a number of other reasons that were prevalent in the day for limiting new immigrants. But the Immigration Acts of 1921 and 24 targeted Italians and Jews, in part because of the concerns about assimilation, and in part because of pure rank prejudice. Oddly enough, the laws in place today were last significantly altered in 1990 in a bill authored by Ted Kennedy. It's nothing like the laws of the 1920s, which limited immigration not just in nationality but also in numbers to a mere 178,000 people per year for what turned out to be 40 years. The Kennedy bill was designed to remove the need for illegal immigration by increasing the number of legal immigrants to over 1 million a year. It hasn't worked. Thanks to the incentives offered by President Obama and bills like the Gang of Eight immigration proposal, last year the number of illegal immigrants rose to 700,000. That brings the total number of immigrants, both legal and illegal in this country, to a record 42 million, comprising 13.3% of the U.S. population, the highest percentage in 105 years. Is this flood of immigrants in the national interest? That question is the question that we should be asking. And it's in fact the question we should be asking about all of our laws. Is the law in the national interest? Immigration laws should serve the interests of the American people. Since immigration involves labor markets, one key requirement of any plan is that it improves opportunities for better jobs and better wages by stimulating growth. Let's look at the numbers. Without a doubt, immigration has held down the cost of labor, increasing profits for businesses. But has it caused growth that has led to higher wages, particularly for workers who these immigrants compete against for jobs? Real hourly wages have increased by about $1 in the last 25 years in real terms, and have slightly declined during this administration. From 2000 to 2014, there were 5.7 million net new jobs created for workers aged 16 to 65. And all of the net new jobs went to immigrants, in spite of the fact that there were 17 million more native-born Americans in the workforce. Democrats like Hillary Clinton say that they are for the American worker, yet they demand amnesty and huge increases in the number of immigrants for one overriding reason: votes, which of course leads to political power. They have no interest in fixing our broken immigration system. The president had a filibuster-proof majority in both the House and the Senate in his first 2 years in office and didn't even bother to introduce an immigration bill, even though he had plenty of time to push Obamacare. To the President and Mrs. Clinton, immigration is only about dividing America by injecting ethnic and racial politics into this debate, not doing right by struggling workers. Immigration is just another example of how Mrs. Clinton has abandoned the millions of Americans who want the opportunity to work and to provide for themselves and their families by using divisive identity politics to gain more power. What I'll be proposing today is in direct contrast to Mrs. Clinton's vision. My proposal says to American workers of all races, gender, ethnicities, that you're welcome to an America that will provide you the opportunity to rise if you work hard and obey the law. My proposal is based on hope and opportunity, not fear and bigotry. The establishment, I might add, the big business community, is not much better. They see immigrants, workers, as a way of diluting the labor pool and lowering labor costs. To them, workers are commodities, and increasing labor supply means more bottom line profitability. Ladies and gentlemen, workers are not commodities. They're real people and real families who have real mortgages to pay and mouths to feed. And they deserve leaders who put them first. That's why I'm here today. I'm running for president not for the sake of power or profit. I'm running for president to fight for the real people who have real families and who are struggling to make ends meet. Over the past 20 years, nearly 35 million legal and illegal immigrants have come to our shores. This is the largest mass immigration America has seen in our history, even surpassing the great wave of the turn of the 20th centuries. These immigrants are largely unskilled and low-skilled labor, and they are competing for the same job that 74% of Americans who do not have a college degree are looking for. Because of labor supply and demand, you see that concept in action. Corporate profits are up because labor costs are down, and executives and shareholders are doing very well. But the American worker has seen stagnant wages now for over a decade. The American worker is struggling, and as a result, the American family is struggling. I know some of my party rolls eyes whenever I make this point, when I see them at fundraisers and party events. Contrary to what the elites along the coast think, the economy does not start in Wall Street and end in Route 128. The economy starts with the family and includes streets and avenues and drives across this country, including Main Street. The American family is the first economy. Just like business, each family needs revenues, pays expenses, and at the end of the month, the books must balance. As families struggle in this ever-competitive labor market, we must make sure our policies do not throw up further roadblocks and dead ends to their ability to succeed. We must rebuild the first economy, and one step is to ensure we have a responsible immigration policy that puts the American worker and American families first. Up until a few days ago, I was the only candidate in this race who put forth a legal and illegal immigration proposal that puts American workers first. I wanted to use this opportunity today to flesh out those proposals and cast a vision for a stronger and healthier and more prosperous America. The plan will fix our broken immigration system that has served as a catalyst to economic stagnation, soaring government spending, and lawlessness that threatens our personal and national security. I am not new to this debate. Nearly a decade ago, I authored a border security legislation that stood in contrast to the legislation President Bush and Senator Kennedy were advocating. Unlike some who are running for president today, I was never a member of a Senate gang because I understood amnesty was not a solution, but I'm going to mess this up. Will perpetuate the problem. Here you go. There you go. I'll do that. Amnesty will perpetuate the problem, not solve the problem. Whether it was a path to citizenship in the Gang of Eight bill, or the right to a permanent work permit supported by Ted Cruz and others, in any event, it's amnesty. Those workers who serve as groundskeepers and waiters, bartenders and maids, they are hardworking Americans who are being hurt most by record levels of legal and illegal immigration. They are the blue-collar Americans who are in direct competition with cheap and at times illegal immigrant labor. Amnesty will make competition more fierce, not less, encourage more illegal immigration, not less, and further depress wages. As important as the debate is over illegal immigration, we can't just speak about securing our borders and turn a blind eye to an entire system that hurts American workers. Until this summer, the only candidate who had a message focused on putting American workers first and putting common sense limits on legal immigration was me. This summer, I was joined by Governor Walker, who was first to change his position and with a few specifics called for limiting legal immigration. Now Donald Trump has joined a majority of Americans and me with some ideas on how to put American workers first. I welcome them both and encourage all candidates and all Americans to listen to this vision of how we can make America stronger. Let's face it, the problems with illegal immigration can mostly be solved immediately because it doesn't involve changing the law. It simply requires enforcing current laws. The president today has the authority and the access to funds to secure our border. Let me be clear. I will do what 5 presidents have promised the American public to do. I will secure the border with Mexico. I will build hundreds of miles of new walls, use state-of-the-art technology, deploy whatever manpower necessary to secure the border with Mexico. I will end the catch and release program of this administration and have personnel deployed as to maximize apprehensions at the border. It's time to stop the bait and switch of the political discussions that happen during a campaign and then forget about those promises when you become president. While I won't demand the government of Mexico build a wall, I want U.S. workers to do that, by the way. I'll make it clear to the Mexican government that they must stop facilitating the lawlessness on the border and cooperate with our efforts. I will do all I can to change Mexico's behavior for the benefit of both countries, but if they fail to cooperate, I'm prepared to do several steps, beginning with authorizing the border crossing cards to be suspended until Mexico begins to cooperate. Visa overstays is one of the largest, if not the largest, factor contributing to our illegal immigration population. The de facto policy of this administration is to track entry visas, but not exits. I will do what no previous administration has done. I will enforce the law by implementing a biometric tracking system for every immigrant who enters America so we can track who they are and whether they've overstayed their visa. Anyone apprehended who has overstayed their visa should be subject to fines and then subsequently removed. I will end the practice of sanctuary cities by withholding federal funds from any city that refuses to cooperate with federal law. I support Kate's Law, and with it, ending the policy that results in 30,000 criminal illegal immigrants being released from prison last year because their native country simply won't accept them. I'll exercise my authority already in law to deny visas to any foreign country that will not take responsibility for their citizens until they take their people back. The federal government has to end policies that have encouraged millions to break the law. In that regard, I'll put an end to the president's unconstitutional executive amnesty, which is largely responsible for this latest border surge. I'll push for congressional action to require that all businesses use E-Verify for all their employees, and immediately encourage all businesses to use E-Verify, and of course hold them responsible if they do not play by the rules. I will propose we join every other developed country in the world, save one, and put an end to the automatic citizenship for children born here to illegal immigrants. This enforcement of, by and large, existing laws will dramatically reduce the number of illegal immigrants competing against legal workers in this country. However, reducing the number of illegal immigrants will not be sufficient to help struggling American workers. I'm proposing 2 changes to the legal immigration system that will reduce the supply of lower-skilled adults holding wages down in America. Like Jeb Bush, I'm proposing eliminating both the visa lottery and chain immigration. Unlike Jeb Bush, I'm not going to increase other categories of immigration to levels beyond the current level. These changes will result in a 25% reduction in legal immigration. This is a stark contrast to every Republican presidential candidate except, now recently, Donald Trump, who says he also wants to return to historical averages. Some, like Ted Cruz, have actually proposed doubling the number of legal immigration, and he is not alone in the Republican field. I believe immigration can be a good thing, but as with anything, there can be too much of a good thing. When our labor markets cannot manage the influx we're receiving, then it's time to recalibrate. This is not anti-immigrant. This is pro-worker, especially for those who are most affected by the waves of new workers. And those folks are recent immigrants, minorities, and of course, younger workers. Even skilled workers have been hurt by our current system. This year, Disney laid off Americans and replaced them with cheap foreign labor. And Southern California Edison had the nerve to have its American workers train their foreign replacements under the H-1B program. Both Disney and Southern California Edison used this program to replace existing American workers, tech workers, who are not supposed to be replaced by this program, but are. From all reports, there's an oversupply of American workers who can fill entry-level tech jobs coming out of our schools. They should be given the opportunity to get the work in their chosen field and grow in experience and rise. I propose overhauling the H-1B visa program so that only the highest skilled workers who can stimulate the economy, create more jobs, will be eligible to come here. Again, this is in stark contrast with other Republicans, particularly, again, Ted Cruz, who seeks to increase H-1Bs five-fold. And that's the current H-1B program. In the same vein, there is a sector of our economy that needs workers that are doesn't have sufficient amount of Americans to do that job. There are some 400 categories in the Department of Commerce of job classifications. Of those 400 job classifications, only a handful of those job classifications are there a majority of folks not born in America doing those jobs. So I think you can safely say, as some like to say about a lot more jobs, that these are jobs Americans are not doing and will not do. But there's only a handful, and of course, not surprisingly, they're all in agriculture. So as a result, I will provide for an opportunity for illegal workers who are in these job classifications to be able to stay here in America under a program that will allow their employer to pay a fee for them to be able to stay, even though they are illegal, as under a temporary guest worker program. It will be an annual fee, and it will be renewable as long as they want to stay in this country. As my father said, America is worth the wait, and it's worth doing it right. This means that we need an immigration policy that rewards those who do it right, an immigration policy that fits our economic needs, and an immigration policy that puts American workers first. I was asked in the first presidential debate how I would explain the enforcement of our immigration laws to the child of an illegal immigrant. I said our compassion as a government is found in our laws because we treat everyone equally under the law. This must be true of our immigration laws. Having an immigration system that turns its back on American citizens and legal immigrants so that more immigrants can come to our shores at a time when there are not enough good-paying jobs to meet their needs is not compassionate. What is compassionate is an immigration system that not only says we want you in America, but says we have an opportunity and a job here for you so you can rise, and each and every one of you, both those in this country and those coming, can live the American dream, something that all of us strive for. That will be my policy as President of the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. This is on. So you could stay right there at the podium, and I'll stand next to you. Questions?
Very good.
How does your proposal for a border wall differ from Donald Trump's?
Well, as I said in the talk, I'm for Americans building the wall, not Mexico. So I'm not going to make Mexico pay for the wall. What I want Mexico to do is really cooperate in stopping the influx of immigrants and the instability of the border. Let's be very clear. I mean, immigration into America is big business for Mexico. The estimates are $22 billion a year flow from people here in this country into Mexico to provide a lot of economic support for people in that country. And there's certainly every indication that Mexico is doing close next to nothing. In fact, some argue they're actually working to facilitate people coming into this country and doing so illegally. That has to change, and certainly a fence is part of it, or wall is part of it. Other types of measures are part of it. But as long as they are not cooperating with us to secure the border, it's going to make our job harder. And that's why I've suggested that I would suspend the border crossing cards, the renewal of border crossing cards as an initial step. I would look to doing other things if we don't see any additional cooperation from the Mexican government to make the border secure.
Outside of those differences you outlined on the wall, what are your other thoughts about Trump's immigration plan and how you differ from it, and perhaps also the things you agree with that are part of it?
I mean, I think there are some differences. Mostly, from what I see, is because of the lack of specifics on the part of Mr. Trump on some of his proposals on the legal side. For example, I've been very clear about what I would do to change the legal immigration system in changing two programs that most people feel have not been beneficial to our country: the idea of chain immigration and on the visa lottery program. I think there is certainly widespread thought on the Republican side that those programs are not good programs. They're allowing people, particularly the chain immigration idea, we're allowing people to come into this country by virtue of the fact that you have an adult relative in this country, and we're allowing other adults to come in who are parents or siblings of that person. The policy prior to that was that if you were an adult, you had to earn citizenship on your own, or at least entry, not citizenship, entry on your own merits, not because you just had someone here who was related to you. And I think that should be the case again going forward. Again, I have no specifics. He's talked about a return to historic levels, but he hasn't talked about how he's going to accomplish that. There are. As far as on the illegal side, there are similarities between what Mr. Trump and I have put forward. I'm glad to see that. Everything from the wall and visa overstays and trying to think. Well, I guess birthright citizenship. All those things are similar.
How will you handle the millions of illegal immigrants already in the country?
As I said, one of the other things is the enforcement of E-Verify. If you stop immigration from the border, if you require people who are here with on overstays to leave, you contact them and move with the process of removal. We know who these people are. And it's they made a promise when they came here that they would leave in a certain time, and so we would go through the process of contacting them and moving forward with their removal. The same thing would happen with other people who are in this country. We would move forward with removals as we find people who, in most cases, we would find people through people having broken the law and being known to law enforcement, and therefore communicate with our ICE agents to begin the process of removal. So it would be a rather easy, systematic way of going through that process of, again, just simply enforcing the law of the country.
This questioner notes that you're a politician who's made family the centerpiece not only of your politics, but as well as your life. And so how would you handle children who are citizens by birthright, but whose parents are here illegally? And one other question related to birthright, I believe it was Governor Perry yesterday, or I believe he said it yesterday, that it could take a decade, many years to change the 14th Amendment. It's just not practical. We should really focus on the border and the wall. So what's your response to birthright changes being practical?
I give a lot of talks on immigration throughout the country, and I would agree with you that the birthright issue is an issue of it's a legal issue that I think, frankly, should be solved, and we should have a determination as to what the 14th Amendment actually says. I think there are good legal arguments on both sides as to whether someone born here, irrespective of the circumstances of their parents, should be considered a citizen of the country. I don't think, from my perspective, looking at all the things I want to accomplish on immigration, that is certainly not my highest priority. There are other things that are much more pressing than that. That is simply another one as I listed, and I think I listed it last. And all the things that encourage people to come into this country illegally. That is one of the things that encourages people to come into this country. And I think we need to eliminate those types of incentives that encourage people to break the law to enter this country. So, but there are many other things that we need to do ahead of that. And so I would agree with Rick Perry that it's probably not our highest priority. It wouldn't be my highest priority. But I think if you want, I just want to be consistent in what I think the law should be. I wanted to lay that out as a marker as to what the law should be in this country.
In terms of the children born to illegal immigrants, and keeping families together, how would you handle that? Would the parents be deported and the children stay and break up families, or would you give some exemption to keep the families together?
Yeah, I keep coming back to this basic premise, which seems to be lost, which is that the people who brought those children here did so breaking the law, and with a full understanding that they very well may be, or they didn't bring children here, when they came to this country without children and then had children here, they knew fully what they were doing. I mean, it's like someone who robs a bank because they want to feed their family. Do I feel bad that they don't have enough money and they felt the need to rob a bank and provide for their family? Of course I feel bad. We all feel bad. We hope people aren't in a situation where they have to do things and breaking the law so they can make a better life for their family. But that doesn't obviate the fact that they've broken the law and that there are consequences to breaking the law. Any more than you would say, well, we can't send mothers and fathers to prison because it would separate them from their children. Well, then no moms and dads would be in jail if we use the same argument that's being made here, that we can't separate children. We're not separating them arbitrarily. We're separating them because they did something and they put themselves in a position to jeopardize that relationship with their children. That is not the responsibility of the government to say, well, we made some mistake. No, they made a mistake in doing what they did. They put their children in that situation, and they should have to deal with the consequences, just like any other American who breaks the law and, as a result of that breaking of the law, gets separated from their children. Unfortunately, it happens every single day in America. It's a tragic thing. I don't like it. I wish they weren't separated. But the fact of the matter is that we are a nation of laws. And to turn this to somehow or another suggest that if you're for separating these, that this is somehow different than any other type of situation where we have people being separated from their families because of the illegal actions of the parents, I think is just inaccurate. I think it's simply a consistent. It's consistent. If we're going to separate people who break laws in this country and go to jail and separate them from their family, then we should be consistent with respect to illegal immigrants who have done the same.
Donald Trump takes credit for bringing immigration front and center, and you said in your remarks you were out ahead on the immigration issue. But either way, it is seemingly the front and center issue in the Republican presidential campaign. Is that a good thing? Does it belong here, or is it crowding out too many other issues that you think need to get focused on?
I announced my campaign from a factory floor in Western Pennsylvania because I think the most important issue facing the economy and most Americans today is the opportunity to live the American dream, particularly for the 74% of Americans who don't have a college degree, the millions of Americans who have seen their wages flatlined. They see that they're losing ground with inflation. There's a lot of folks out there who don't feel America's working for them. And when I announced for president, I listed a whole bunch of things that I thought could turn that around. One is to grow the economy, create jobs, and particularly in the manufacturing sector of the economy. which creates good paying jobs and the ability for people to be able to provide for themselves and their families. We've gone from 20 million people in manufacturing in 1980 down to 11 million, and it's dropping like a rock right now because of the policies of this administration. And so I've focused my entire campaign, what can we do to help those who are struggling the most in America today? And I talk about tax policy that will help. I talk about regulatory policy that will help. I talk about trade policy that will help. And of course, you have to talk about labor markets and what is the state of labor markets in America today. And the reality is that we have a lot of American workers who are not seeing their wages go up because of an increase in the supply of 35 million people. Now, some would say that's a good thing. Go ahead and make the argument that's a good thing. And I'm sure there are arguments that will be made. But here's the point. The point is this is a legitimate debate. You say, was it a good thing or bad thing that we're having this debate? It's a legitimate debate. It hasn't been because many on the other side have suggested that anybody even wants to raise this issue. Well, you're raising it because, you're anti-Hispanic or you're anti-immigrant. I'm the son of an immigrant. I'm not anti-immigrant. What I am is to make sure that America is strong for the immigrants who do come, that there's opportunities available for people to be able to rise and live that dream. That's the promise of this country. And to suggest that reducing levels of immigration or enforcing the law with respect to the over 10 million people who are here illegally is somehow anti-immigrant suggests that maybe the alternative is that we should allow everybody in as much as they want, and there should be no limits on immigration, because I assume that unless you're for that, then you're anti-immigrant. If you're for any limits, I guess you're anti-immigrant. That I don't see too many. There may be some out there who are for open borders and anybody to come in at any time. I don't see too many people in public life. If you're not for that, then you can't call anybody who wants to have a discussion as to what the limits are anti-immigrant. That's an appropriate public policy discussion that should be driven by the facts. And up until this point, I don't think it has been. I think it's been driven by an attempt by one party to try to make this a xenophobic football. And I'm hopeful that as more information comes out about the impact of immigration on the American workforce, the impact of illegal immigration on our security and safety, as well as the economy of this country, we can start to have a rational discussion about what the policies of this country should be to help people who are looking for the American dream.
So beyond immigration, what are the reasons for the growing gap between the rich and the poor, and how would you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before how important it is that we have an a manufacturing policy that makes us number one in manufacturing. And I think that is the key economically for us to have a strong middle of America. I wrote a book a year ago, I'm sure all of you have read. It's called Blue Collar Conservative, Recommitting to an America That Works. And I actually lay out in great detail how we're going to accomplish that. I talk about the manufacturing. I talk about cutting taxes and making us competitive. We have the highest corporate taxes in the world. I'll be proposing an economic plan here probably in September, which we have now labeled the 2020 Perfect Vision for America, because it's a 20% tax, flat tax on corporate income, and a 20% flat tax on individual income. It'll be very pro-growth. It allows for gets rid of all of the special interest provisions in the tax code on the corporate side as well as the individual side, and has a simple, strong, pro-growth plan that will get this economy going. It'll have particular provisions that will provide extra incentives to manufacturing, including repatriation of profits, provision to lower the taxes on profits made by companies that are U.S.-based, but those profits were made overseas, to be able to bring those profits back to America and not get hit with up to a 40% tax. We have, I mentioned trade programs that we need to make sure that we enforce our trade laws and at the same time open up markets. I mean, I know some people have suggested that my policies of being against the Trade Promotion Authority, which I was, means that I'm not for future trade laws. I am. I voted for almost every trade bill that was in the United States Senate when I was there, and same thing in the House. I voted against NAFTA, but other than that, I support it and do support opening up opportunities, particularly in the Pacific Rim, but we have to do so in a way that makes sure that we're not undermining American workers at the same time. And frankly, I simply have no faith that the president will do that. He's given me no indication that he cares at all about American workers with his policies toward manufacturing and energy and a whole host of other things that are lowering wages in America today. As we've seen, wages have declined. Real wages have declined under this president and continue to decline under this president. And finally, the American family. I mentioned in my speech, I always mention it in my speeches because every book that you'll read, every sociology textbook, every study that's been done of America and the reason for the hollowing out of the middle of this country points to a culprit that is first and foremost among them, and that's the breakdown of the nuclear family in America. That's from Robert Putnam's recent book that he put out to the other side, Charles Murray's book On the Other Side, Coming Apart. Both of whom and many others have suggested that the reason we're having trouble in our education system, the reason we're having trouble with people who are not be able to rise and get good paying jobs is because it's directly tied to increased incarceration rates, et cetera, is because of the breakdown of the nuclear family in America, which continues to be a problem. And I don't see anything being done by either party to address it. Neither party. In fact, no one talks about it. I find myself, oftentimes in these meetings that I referred to, in party meetings and in New York, as the only one mentioning what is the huge elephant in the room. And it's even an elephant in the room in the Democratic Party, I might add. You even have those on the left who are now suggesting this is a problem we can no longer ignore, yet neither political party wants to talk about it because, it's just politically incorrect to do it. I think we reach the point that political correctness has gotten us in a position that we won't even fight for the lives of our children and their future, then we need to have some politically incorrect people run for president and put those children on the front and center of the public policy debate, and I am doing that.
I mentioned in the introduction that you're way down in the polls, and I also said what you say you think of polls. But what is your own personal benchmark in your head that's going to tell you I'm going to get out? Would it be not finishing in the top 3 or 4 in Iowa? Or what is the thing, if it's not the polls, what is the thing that would make you leave the race? Yeah,
it's sort of like the Supreme Court when it comes to pornography. We'll know it when you see it. And it's sort of the same. You're going to know. I'll certainly, as 4 years ago, it was apparent to me when we dropped out of the race, it was the time to drop out of the race. Some suggested it was a little too late. Others suggested it was a little too early. I'm the Goldilocks. Just right. And so I'll certainly know if that eventuality ever comes. Of course, I don't anticipate dealing with that problem. But right now, I feel very comfortable going out there, articulating a strong, positive vision for America, having answers. And unlike everybody else who will go up, and this is a case in immigration, people say, well, you can't, this will never get done. You won't be able to pass something like this. I would make the argument, if you look at my track record on some issues that no one thought could be passed, we have a pretty good record of passing them. Welfare reform, no one thought that could be passed. In fact, Bill Clinton vetoed it twice. But we were able to get more than a dozen Democrats to join us in the United States Senate and pass a welfare reform bill that ended a federal entitlement, something that was predicted could never happen in Washington, D.C. It never would be allowed unless you had a supermajority of Republicans. You would never be able to get rid of a federal entitlement for the poor. And we did. And I led that charge. I wrote the original bill when I was in the House and managed the bill when I was in the Senate. If you look at reforming the healthcare system, we have a lot of folks out there right now trying to run around telling you how they're going to reform the healthcare system. And unfortunately, Republicans were pretty bereft of ideas, didn't have any ideas on how to move forward and do something that was going to actually improve the private economy when it comes to, and the power of patients when it comes to the healthcare system, until Rick Santorum came along and introduced the concept of health savings accounts over 20 years ago, and fought for them and passed them in spite of opposition by Democrats and even by this president. The reality is we have a long track record. Abortion bills. How many abortion bills passed the United States Senate and the House? I can think of 3 in the last 50 years. And I authored and led the fight on all 3 of them and got Democratic support for all 3 of them. So I just share with you that, we have a record of being a principled conservative and going out there and in many cases pushing the envelope on public policy to restore the opportunities that I think America has for everybody and can have for everybody by restoring our conservative principles back here in Washington, D.C. But nobody else in this field has a record of doing any of those things. You have a lot of folks who will come out there and have very sharp elbows and tell you how everything is wrong and tell you why everything is broken. But they have no record to show that they've been able to do any of those things and make anything happen. In fact, most of the record of the people who are running, who are United States senators, is abject failure. And I would suggest that we need to look at folks who accomplish things before we decide whether they should be promoted or not. And I think we've got a pretty good track record of accomplishment here.
You mentioned abortion, and the other day, I believe you said not only should Planned Parenthood be defunded, but they should be prosecuted, in reference to some of these recent videos that had come out. Do you have any concerns that cutbacks to Planned Parenthood would affect the birth control part of its offerings and inadvertently lead to an increase in abortions?
Well, first off, I don't think there's any numbers out there that suggest that access to contraception actually reduces the number of abortions. I think there's pretty good studies out there, pretty compelling studies that show that there is no real correlation and hasn't been for quite some time. So having said that, no, I'm not concerned about the link between contraception and abortion. But contraception is part of a federal program, and if Planned Parenthood doesn't get those monies, there are lots of other organizations out there that can fill the need that Planned Parenthood has provided to provide these types of services. So I'm not worried about the access to contraception that is provided in Title X coming through other organizations other than Planned Parenthood. And I am worried about an organization that was founded by a eugenicist whose purpose was to eliminate undesirable races and people. It's stunning to me that a eugenicist who has such a horrific record of man's inhumanity to man is someone that the current day politicians are happy to receive awards in her name, yet including a black politician, because she was, as you know, a racist who wanted to eliminate the black race. This is who Planned Parenthood is. Planned Parenthood is about, and has been, started by a eugenicist whose objective was to dehumanize certain individuals so they could be culled from society. I read a book a few years ago entitled "How Do You Kill 11 Million People?" It was talking about the genocides that were going on then. And it was a short book. It's really a pretty simple answer. It could have been answered in 2 words. You lie. That's how you do it. You lie to the people. And that's what this is about. It's about a lie of what a child in the womb really is. Oh, it's just a blob of tissue. It's pre-human. It's not something that we need to be concerned about. Just like the argument was from Margaret Sanger about other races and other disabled and others who were, in her mind, subhuman and didn't need to be concerned about. And that's what Planned Parenthood is doing. They're treating these children in the womb as if, well, they're not real human beings. Except the problem here with these videos is that they're harvesting human body parts. So it's sort of hard to make the argument these aren't human beings when they're harvesting human organs. The most recent video may be the most abhorrent, the interview with someone who described a procedure where a little boy was born alive. In fact, made a point of showing that the little boy's heart was beating. So the baby survived an abortion and was still alive, but it didn't deter her at all from taking out the little boy's brain while he was alive. But of course, that doesn't horrify anybody who are supporters of Planned Parenthood. This doesn't bother people. Why? Because, well, this is just the ugly business of what abortion is. I mean, these are children that, these are not wanted, and therefore they're subhuman, and we can treat them. We can treat little children alive. And we can remove their head, we can remove their brains. And we can talk about it. Isn't this cool? Isn't this neat? Look, I can tap their chest and you can see their heart beating. And it doesn't seem to affect the moral compass of any of our leaders in Washington, D.C. that that this is somehow beyond the pale, that somehow or another this doesn't speak well for who we are as a human race here in America, as a society. But no, it just doesn't seem to bother anybody because we've succeeded in dehumanizing. Dehumanizing. That's what this is all about. Yet we're dehumanizing children who are being harvested for human body parts. I guess I would say that hopefully the people who are looking at these videos will come to agree that this organization that fosters this type of behavior should not only not be receiving federal funds, but that the people doing this who are breaking the law. I was the author of the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, which I wrote for this particular situation and was passed with near unanimous support in the House and Senate. It said that if a child is born alive as a result of abortion, you couldn't kill it, much less harvest its brain while it's living. But in Planned Parenthood, they're doing that. That should be prosecuted. Shouldn't just be defunded. It should be prosecuted, and this organization that creates an environment for these things to happen should be put out of business, not be held up as some paragon of virtue of the left.
Senator, you have compared the Supreme Court decision making gay marriage a constitutional right to the Dred Scott decision justifying slavery. What, as president, could you do to fight back against something that you oppose on moral grounds, but that is now a constitutional right?
Well, I would say this, that I didn't compare the recent decision of the court with Dred Scott. Justice Roberts compared the two. I was simply quoting Justice Roberts' opinion, where he said this basis of the legal basis that undergirded Dred Scott is the same legal basis that is undergirding this decision, and they both had, quote, in his words, no constitutional basis for this decision. Having read Justice Kennedy's decision, it is not a legal work. I mean, it is not a work of legal scholarship. It is simply, in my opinion, a rambling of someone who wanted to get a decision and came up with all sorts of interesting ideas, none of which are based in the Constitution. The court has the authority. Let's take the case of birthright citizenship. There is a legal dispute as to what the language of the 14th Amendment means. It is, to me, something that people on both sides of this issue have very legitimate arguments. I could not say that if someone said to me that the Constitution doesn't permit birthrights, I can't say for certain that they're wrong. And I don't think for certain they can say we're wrong. I think that's one of these situations where the court must step in and has a role of stepping in making these types of decisions. What they don't have the right to do is to create new constitutional rights. That is not within their purview. There's nothing that historically that Congress and the president have said that they give the court broad latitudes to pretty much do whatever they want to do when it comes to the Constitution of this country. And when the court oversteps its bounds, as it has in cases, then it is the responsibility of the president, the people, the Congress, to say that the court has to be held accountable and the law has to be changed. That, of course, takes all of those things. It does take a president, it does take the people, it does take the Congress. And if there isn't support to do that, then the court wins. Even though they may have done something unconstitutional, the court wins because the other branches of government are incapable of successfully challenging them. Here's my point when it comes to who should be if there's one branch of government that should have more leeway in changing the Constitution, I would make the argument it should be the president and the Congress. And the reason is the president and the Congress can be thrown out if the public finds their decisions to be abhorrent or objectionable. The problem with the court is we could be stuck with the court for 30 years, and they are insulated, isolated from the American public, and as a result, their actions can be much more insidious than the actions of a president or Congress. When a president or Congress stands up to a court and says you're wrong and pushes back, as I did in the case of the partial birth abortion statute back in 2003, where the court found a similar statute unconstitutional, I was undeterred. We passed an almost identical statute, sent it back to passed it and said we were going to enforce it, and the court backed down because I think they knew they were off base. That has to happen, in my opinion, more when the court goes astray.
Before I ask the last question, I have some housekeeping. The National Press Club is the world's leading professional organization for journalists. We fight for a free press worldwide. And for more information about the club, go to our website, that's press.org. And we also have a journalism institute, the National Press Club Journalism Institute. To learn more about the institute and to donate, go to press.org/institute. I'd also like to remind you about some upcoming programs. On September 2nd, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley will address a luncheon about the New South. On September 5th, the Press Club will hold its annual 5K to raise money for journalism scholarships, training, and press freedom. And on September 14th, NASA astronauts Mark Kelly and Terry Virts will discuss their work aboard the International Space Station. I'd now like to present Senator Santorum with the traditional National Press Club mug.
Very nice.
And that would be suitable on a shelf a couple blocks away at the White House,
Worked for me.
in Pennsylvania, wherever. It's very portable. It could even go to Iowa with you, where you're headed next.
Thank you.
Final question. You mentioned your family and how much you like to talk about your family. In fact, you brought some family
I
with you
should be
today.
introducing my son and daughter who are here. Daniel, who's number 3, Sarah Maria, who's number 4. Daniel was taking off a semester. He's a junior at the Military College of South Carolina, the Citadel, and so he has taken off a semester to work on the campaign with us. When he graduates, he is going to be heading to the Air Force. And my number 4 child, our daughter Sarah Maria, is a senior in high school and looking as to what great plans she has in the future. So it's an exciting year for all of us to figure out where Sarah Maria is heading.
And you wrote a book about your youngest daughter,
My
Bella.
wife and I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so our final question for you is, how is Bella doing?
Thank you so much for that question. And I'm always amazed. One of the great things I took from the last campaign was the heart of the American people is still beating strong and wonderful and compassionate. And I can't tell you the number of people from all walks of life, from all political perspectives, who in the last campaign asked that very question and did so in a heartfelt way. And it renews your faith that as divided as we seem to be and as rancorous as this town is, there's still some commonality that if we can use it as a touchstone, that we might be able to actually work together in a more civil way. And certainly that is my intent. And I think if you look at the history of me in the Congress, that's what I was able to accomplish. My wife, Karen, and I wrote a book earlier this year called Bella's Gift. We were asked to write a book about the experience of what happened to us during the campaign and raising a little girl who has a 1%, who had at the time she was born, at least we found out 4 days later that she had this genetic disorder, had a 1% survival chance to reach a year. And she is now 7. She just lost her 2 front teeth, so we know what we're getting her for Christmas. And we're very, very excited that she's doing well. Karen and I wrote this book to chronicle our journey called Bella's Gift. I always say we split the book in half. She wrote 11 chapters, I wrote 7. And it's a real discussion about how difficult, challenging, stressful raising a child, particularly one who has severe health problems, and in Bella's case, almost died twice, and how it is a great challenge to the family, but how it is an incredible blessing. And certainly we found, and now being in the world of the disabled, so many people who have come up to us and shared their stories with us that while it is a challenge, and I know in many cases in this world you see, for example, Down syndrome children reports are that 80 to 90% of Down syndrome children are aborted because people see people with disabilities as something not to be embraced and wanted, and that society says is just it's too hard, or it's you have to look out for yourself, and that this is just too difficult a task to manage. And what we found is that yes, it's difficult, yes, it's stressful, but it's a blessing that we thank God for every single day. And so thank you for asking about her. Thank you for your prayers, and we will continue to shine Bella's light very brightly every chance we get. Thank you.
Senator, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the National Press Club staff, including its Journalism Institute and Broadcast Center, for helping us organize today's event. And if you would like a copy of this program or to learn more about the club, go to that website, press.org. Thank you very much for coming today.